Hello, denizens of the internet. Well, today I'm having two-camera fun. Why? I don't know, because I can. Today's topic is, does Apple have a pickle up its bum? Stay tuned. You too. Does Apple have a pickle up its bum? Well, we know what the answer to that is, of course. Yes, of course, Apple has a pickle up its bum. It's always been like that. I think what you were thinking I was getting at, that some things had changed since Steve Jobs had departed, but that's not true. The fact is that Apple has always been like that. It's always been a very anal retentive company. Let me tell you a story. Now, this happened after Steve left. I mean, I call him Steve because, we had this, relationship. But anyway, that's not true. Long time ago, Apple, at least Apple Canada, had what I call the logo Gestapo. And when we were doing artwork that involved the Apple logo, which at the time was not the white thing that they have now, or the black, single color monochromatic logo, they had, the famous Apple multicolor logo. Well, if you didn't get that logo correct in any kind of print work or multimedia work or TV work, well, the logo Nazis would descend upon you. You get the phone calls and the knocks at the doors. It's, Mr. Chato, the Apple logo, the third color down is not the right Pantone color! You will change it! Well, they didn't scream that loudly, but they were nasty, and it was patently ridiculous, especially in the day when we were doing multimedia. I mean, most of the work was going to computers, Windows computers that only display 256 colors, and so you had to dither the colors, and you could never get the Apple logo correctly, and Apple would freak out. Well, I would just completely ignore them anytime they complained. So that was an example of Apple with a pickle up its bum. So, and when Steve came back and magically rearranged the company and saved Apple, well, the pickle up the bum thing never really changed. So let's accept the fact that this is the way Apple is. But the point is, and people who are Apple complainers, and sometimes, I can be in that camp, the point is that Apple is managing a huge number of things, and we should not underestimate the amount of effort, work, and programming effort that's required to, run their iCloud servers and make sure things are secure, and coming up with things like, the facial detection and the thumb detection. These are huge efforts, and we should congratulate the people of Apple for making that part of the business almost seamless and generally, working really well. Like the camera on the iPhones are spectacular, and very few people complain about the cameras on the iPhone. So Apple is succeeding in many, many places that nobody gives them enough credit for. But Siri has fallen way behind Google Assistant. That one thing can tarnish the entire reputation of a company. And I think Apple has some problems with Siri, especially as it relates to the release of the HomePod, which I don't think has been that successful, primarily because Siri has gotten a lot of bad reviews. But it's, again, another product like the Mac Pro, where it's clear that Apple is scrambling to pull resources together to try to, make that device. The issue is that it's clear that 4 weeks before they released it, they put the Siri team on it and said, hey, put Siri on it. I mean, I'm joking. It was probably 5 weeks. But the point is, it's clear that, the Siri group has not had enough time with the HomePod to make it work. And it doesn't work as well as Alexa and the Google Assistant on the Google Home device. And that's embarrassing for Apple. So all the good that it does, all the good that they do in the background that we don't see, that's really hard to do and do consistently and safely and seamlessly, all that stuff is pushed aside because of the things that we do see. We're coming up to the Worldwide Developers Conference in June. I hearken back to an article in Bloomberg back in December, and I'll link to that, where the Bloomberg people talked about how they got secret info that iOS and the macOS are going to merge even further. Now, How much they're going to merge, I don't know. I mean, I'm a OS junkie, and it's always nice to see updates to the OS. It's very exciting to see, what both Microsoft and Apple come up with for their OSs. Now, Apple has not done anything, particularly dramatic with macOS in a long while, which makes it kind of boring. Maybe it should be boring. I don't know. I mean, an OS primarily needs to be, very, very solid. But if you take a look at the what they've laid out now with High Sierra and putting Apple file system on it and 64-bit only applications. I mean, very soon Apple will not allow any 30-bit applications onto Mac OS. It's clear that, they're laying the groundwork for iOS and Mac OS to merge in some way, let you run iOS applications on the macOS, because quite frankly, most of the developers are doing their work on iOS. That's a more fertile ground. Maybe they're making more money on iOS. And this is a way for Apple to mitigate, those two realms. How they're going to do it, I have no idea, but it's clear that they're going to do it. Now, another thing that came up that was very, very interesting. This guy, and I'll link to him, he's a Unix guy, he has a video on how FreeBSD, which is the basis for Apple's Darwin Unix kernel for Mac OS, FreeBSD is falling behind. People are not programming for it, or they're not updating it, because it's an open source version of BSD Unix, which again goes back to the 70s, believe it or not. Apple is running on a core of code that goes back to the 70s. Extraordinary, isn't that amazing? Anyways, the point is, this fellow says that people are getting, they're getting out of the FreeBSD game. Linux seems to be winning the hearts and minds of many of the bigger Unix experiences, even though the FreeBSD people consider Linux a toy. But that's, if you want to have a war, there's nothing compared to the Apple Windows Mac OS Windows battle as compared to the FreeBSD Linux group. I mean, these people are at each other's throats. The point is, this guy is saying that the FreeBSD people are disappearing, and there's not as many people squashing bugs, and both iOS and Mac OS is based on FreeBSD. So, what's going to happen? I certainly don't know. It's not the realm that I play in, but I thought it was interesting. Obviously, Apple has the resources to be able to do whatever it is that they need. But it seems kind of sad that, Apple is not benefiting from the larger, wider community of Unix developers. So this developers conference in June, I hope Apple finally comes out with a really kick-ass, fun, interesting, wild update to the Mac OS, because it's about time. Well, so we'll see you later, Internet denizens. So long. Which camera should I go with? So long. I'll do it to both. So long. So long.